Hail Internet, it's Paul, it's Matt, the Dork Lords. We are here today talking about Loki, Season 2, Episode 4, Heart of the TVA. We open with Ms. Minutes and Ravonna at the end of time where we left them at the end of Episode 3. Ms. Minutes shows Ravonna the secret. Ravonna led He Who Remains' forces, helped him win the temporal war. He Who Remains promised to rule with her. Then he had Miss Minutes erase her memories along with everyone else at the TVA. We end with a shocking twist. Victor Timely volunteers to fix the temporal loom, hypes himself up. Time to be brave, time to be brave. Heads out on the causeway and instantly spaghettifies. It's a visceral death. It kind of reminds me of Samuel L. Jackson's kind of like, we can do this monologue, followed immediately by his grisly death in Deep Blue Sea, where the shark gets him. But anyway. But,
I thought you were going to say Mr. Fantastic's death in Doctor Strange and the...
Yeah, great point. Yep, that too. Yep. So, the temporal loom breaks. A bright light engulfs our heroes. Credits. So, Paul...
Yes?
What'd you think of Episode 4?
Maybe a 6.5.
Woo.
You know,
Okay.
in some ways I feel like it was treading water, you know, to the last episodes there. And so, you know, some of the little touches they had, I wasn't especially pleased with. The whole Timely goes out for hot chocolate, you know.
Okay, the hot cocoa machine.
Yeah, you know, that wasn't thrilling. Well, I like Brad. I like the actor that plays Brad and whatever. Yep. You don't get a sense of what Renslayer is really planning other than just to get control of the TVA. And, you know, if you consider last week where it was sort of like He Who Remains had a plan. And so Miss Minutes and Renslayer were going to do that plan. And the plan, was just to inspire Timely and then have him take over again. I mean, you know, so...
Sounds like
you know, it doesn't sound like there really is much to what they're doing other than they just want to be in charge. So, you know, this is another episode of that. You know, one of the things that changed is Sylvie, you know, she's not working against them anymore, which is good. You know,
True.
We got to see that one event, which unfortunately, the event that we saw where Loki was pruned, yes. So he had to be pruned, and Loki had to prune himself. And so unfortunately, that makes me feel like this catastrophic end to this episode is really just saying, okay, now we're going to do it again and not have that end happen. And so it's like, okay, you know, unfortunately, it's not making me very encouraged about the end of the series. So,
Wow.
So yeah,
Okay.
6.5.
6.5. I had a different take on it. I'm giving this an 8.5, Paul.
Wow.
I think it did actually a lot of things right, but I get your point. You know, how clever is this show? It's like I think a lot kind of depends on how the different threads come together in the end here. But I liked the cliffhanger ending. I mean, since it's in episode 4, we know pretty much everybody's coming back. So like, curse you, time travel. But but I did like it. I was not prepared for like just and we either prune or wipe off the board everybody. You know, in one big you lost. Like, okay, wow, okay, I like that. Also, you were talking about Sylvie now being on board. I liked that conversation. What I think brought her on board is the conversation between Loki and Sylvie, where he's like,
Yeah,
look, it's easy to destroy stuff, you know, but it's hard to fix things that are broken. That's what's difficult. And
Sure.
I feel like we're getting a little bit of that's his character arc. He was I just break stuff. I'm evil or whatever. I break things. And now he's taking on more of a caretaker role. And I think that's going to ultimately end with him doing what He Who Remains suggested he do at the end of season 1, which is like, take my place. I think Loki's going to be our TV face of the TVA. He's going to be running the TVA. is my thought. But
Interesting. I don't think so, but
you don't think
okay.
so? Okay, all right. I mean, it's a bit of a game.
Because but
I just feel like that's the way his arc is headed right now.
Sure.
He seems to be making choices to say like, oh, actually, I don't want 5 billion Kangs all vying for supremacy and killing everybody off. I want to, I think that was I think the TVA had the right idea. It was just poorly executed. Maybe I can do it better. We are gods, he says, right? She's like, we can't play God. He's like, we are gods.
Right. Yeah.
So
I feel like if I had to put money on it, that Sylvie would end up being in charge of the TVA.
Okay.
I think dramatically that would have more meaning. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And that then leaves Loki free.
That Hunter B-15 and Mobius can be. Well, if I had to bet, Mobius will go back to whatever life he had before. Hunter B-15 and Sylvie will take over the TVA, and Renslayer, who knows? Maybe she'll see what her life was before too, and go back. The other thing I didn't mention is apparently Victor Timely and OB, inspired each other, and
paradox.
It's like, okay, if that's another thing you might do for comedic reasons.
Right, it's a comedy bit, but you're right. And in terms of like a serious plot development that's going to have lasting impact, you can't just. Oh, well, you can, but it would be nice if you didn't just forget about it and go, that's what happened.
Yeah.
It was my problem in some ways with the Terminator franchise after a while when it kept paradoxing itself, and you're like, what did you do? What did you do?
Yeah.
So, we'll see. I agree that if they just leave it as is, if this is the state of things and they're just like, yep, that's what happened, I don't really like that solution. So I'm hoping that maybe in these last 2 episodes of this season we'll see something different there. Because, for instance, we'll get to it in a second. When we talk about what might be coming next. We'll just chat about where we might see this thing's going, especially because we've seen some scenes from the trailers that I think might be, helpful in figuring out where they're going. But I did want to bring up that I've mentioned this before, but it was so traumatic at the time that I'm going to mention it again.
Okay.
The everybody dies blackout ending. Reminds me of the series finale of Blake 7.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Phew. I thought you were going to say Lord of the Rings. I was like, what?
They didn't all die. Paul. Now, that would have been shocking. I agree. If the Fellowship did all die.
I haven't read it. I haven't read the whole series. So
you didn't know that Tolkien
I've
was
read
a
any
nihilist?
of the series. So, I just didn't,
No, but it just did harken back to that moment when you just see like, oh crap, is everybody just gone?
Really?
It was
okay.
A little bit.
I knew there was 2 episodes left. So
yeah, exactly. They're not. But it just reminded. I had a PTSD flashback.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So, spoiler alert for those of you watching the Blake 7 show, which is only 40 years old at this point.
Yes.
All the heroes die at the end, one by one. And then the last one dying under the final credits. And there was no internet at the time. So I was stunned, and I was hoping that the following Sunday, the show would be back with some explanation for what happened. Like, I would have even accepted, like, it was all a dream, or, let's time travel. I'm like, fine, the show's still going, great. But no, the following Sunday shows up. I'm like, oh, God, please.
You poor
let
child.
the show be on. And then the show came on, and I'm like, okay, all right. But no, it started over. Season 1, episode 1. I was they freaking nuked the cast, and I was devastated. I had to admit, I was just like, floored.
So if I'm right, and we'll see that day over again, it will be, Blake 7, because it'll start over again. And
Dude, if they nuke the cast, that would be so bold. I mean, honestly, if they were just like, if we just cut now to some little flashback memory moment or something, and then it just turns out that Loki's gone. It would be weird, but I'd be like, I give you guys credit. I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Slow clap.
I'm in on the ending. Yeah, exactly. There's zero chance that that's happening.
No.
So we have seen some shots from the trailers that give us some idea of what's going to happen.
I haven't actually seen those, so you'll be telling me about them as well.
There is a shot of Ravonna, and she's wearing the same outfit that she's wearing here, and she's back at the end of time, not in the castle, but in the realm.
Sure.
And she's apparently standing in front of Eliath, the big guardian creature, because there's a big purple light hitting her.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So it suggests that the folks who were pruned in this episode, just like anyone who gets pruned, are zapped to the end of time. And that's where they're going to have their own struggles. So we're going to have, like, those folks that got pruned in this episode will be, including Ravonna, are going to try to, I assume, fight their way back into some timeline, is my guess.
Sure, why not?
But I don't think that's the non-pruned folks, because we see shots of our agents in apparently pre-TVA locations. So, for instance, B-15. It looks like there's a shot where she appears to be a doctor, if I had to guess. Casey appears to be in prison, but not in the TVA prison, in I don't know, 1950s kind of prison. Mobius, it looks like he's probably working at a jet ski dealership. And so I think what's going to happen is, what the suggestion is, that when the loom exploded, it put our folks back in wherever they were on the sacred timeline before they got taken.
You think they're all taken from the sacred timeline? I thought the point is that they're variants and they were taken from alternate timelines.
Right, but I mean, at some point they were on the sacred timeline, and then they got taken because they were making a variation. But I don't know. Maybe you're right. I don't know how that works. I'm just thinking maybe that's a simple way to think of it. Like, at the moment that they were still on the main one, they get put back there. I don't know. Because with Mobius and the jet ski, it feels like that he was probably on the sacred timeline selling jet skis, and then he did something that screwed up the timeline. But so the fact that we see probably him there, that makes me think that they're back on the sacred timeline somehow. I feel like Loki, whether it's because, as we learned in this episode, or Obi's like, well, we have to turn off the magic dampener, and I do it.
Yes.
So the fact that he can use magic, or the fact that maybe because the loom is destroyed, maybe he starts time slipping again. For some reason, Loki is not perhaps affected by it, and then has to go reassemble the team. That's kind of what I'm thinking is he goes back to these various, and he grabs those folks. And so he is inevitably when Mobius is talking about the guy who took me, I'd like to thank him. It's Loki in this situation. Loki's the one who's going to take him back to the TVA to make it work, which is all part of that thing I'm thinking about, where Loki becomes, I will say, he who remains. But that's it's a little nebulous there. There's still a lot.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah,
but I think that might be somewhere where it's going. Not sure about Sylvie's part and all that. That's the thing. I think there's a shot. We see one shot in the trailer of Sylvie using her powers. It looks like it's some kind of combat scenario in the castle at the end of time. So we haven't seen her there yet this season. So somehow she goes there. I don't know.
Okay.
I liked the scene where, I mean, it was visceral in what we didn't see, but the General Dox and her followers getting crushed off camera, I thought it was pretty effectively disturbing. I don't know what your thoughts were on that scene.
Yeah, I don't know. Parts of me thought it was clever not to show it. And, of course, parts of me thought, boy, that's cheaper not to show it.
Yeah. You take that in connection with the scene where we see at the beginning when we see the flashback to Ravonna and He Who Remains talking, and he says like, you led my armies, thank you. And they're like, we won't show any of that.
Yes.
We'll talk about it. Was great, well done, you. That made me also think like it's cheaper to do that. But
unfortunately, though, my feeling, the latest thought I've had about it is, so now they're not a part of the story anymore.
Well, yeah, but if we reverse
back in time, but
I know.
Everybody's back then. I mean, Ravonna's back too. I mean, so it's just another flouting of, this Loki has its own physics.
Yeah.
Its own laws of physics.
Yeah, it's almost like what does the story need? Let's do that. Like, okay. Yeah, the Victor Timely thing, it was the fact that he taught OB and then OB taught him, or because he gave him the manual.
Yeah, I like the idea of if he remains before he became that was some other variant of Kang, I would have been happier than if it was Victor Timely. So I'd rather them find a variant who is Victor Timely and make that guy the person, because it's rather than, we went back to the sacred timeline, which is what they did, and gave the thing to him to make it happen in the first place and have it be a time loop, and you can't affect your own past, or someone can affect your past. It's like, okay, that's okay, fine. It's like, you have this whole promise. The whole thing is supposed to be about alternate realities, and everything is on the same damn timeline in this show.
If we do have this scenario where Loki's getting the gang back together and he's going and picking these people out of their pre-variant timelines, he could theoretically go back to Victor Timely when he was still in the sacred timeline. Remember, they took him out of a branch timeline. They gave him the book in the sacred timeline, but when you go forward a few decades to 1893, when they show up and grab him, it's from a branch timeline.
Oh, interesting.
So theoretically, there is a sacred timeline, Victor Timely, that you could go grab. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I think that's an assumption you're making. Maybe you're right.
Yeah.
It's just that it just lays the question of how did Victor Timely, if he was the one, and presumably he's the one. Yeah, he's the one. How did Victor Timely create it then? Right?
Yeah.
And, it's like, is there a Victor Timely that was like, no, actually I wasn't a hustler. I, was diligent and created the TVA. But that's not the story they're telling. Yeah, so since we're 4 episodes in and there's only 2 left, I'm starting to lose faith. I still, at least thankfully, it's more enjoyable than I found Secret Invasion.
Oh, certainly, in my opinion. Yeah.
And I don't know, it's funny, when I look back on the first season of Loki, it's not one of those shows where I feel like, well, I should watch that again. It's like, well, I kind of saw it. The 1 or 2 times I've tried to watch it, it's sort of like, too much chaff and not much good stuff.
Okay.
So I kind of feel like I tried watching this one again and I kind of skipped ahead a lot.
I like this episode pretty well. I thought it just was enjoyable to me as it went along. So I'm giving it a higher mark. I did like that they failed in the end. Obviously, where does this go? And if they just find a very convenient way to reset it without any kind of stakes or any costs or anything, that would be pretty lame. So in some ways, we've mentioned it before in other shows, but how I feel about this ultimately will be how they resolve this. And if they just, hit a button and reset and they're like, oh, that's fine. Then like, okay. So
yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, but if you think about it this way, though, I mean, you can be encouraged because you might say that gives them possibilities, I guess.
Yeah, right.
There are a show that had that, that's coming up, actually, going to start up again fairly soon, is the Lazarus Project.
Right.
They, and seeing scenes from the second season, they're just going crazier. And
they are going crazier.
Yeah, so good. So the Lazarus That's Project, what you want.
We covered that. We covered season 1 not too long ago, earlier this year. That is coming back around, but it's coming back around in England. So we would probably wait until it comes back to, say, TNT, I think is where it was on here, before we covered it again. So I feel like not many people are going to be watching the English version, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Anyway, we'll address
tell us.
But it's good. It's good that it's coming back around. It is a fun, high concept show, and I guess in some ways it has some parallels to this show in that way. So yeah, they have their own TVA in a way.
Yeah, and they discard with the whole the alternate realities that they create don't exist. They end themselves.
Yep. Right.
So it's not as a result of what they're doing. They're natural ends, and they just reset everything and everyone goes back. So, so if they find some interesting things like that in these last couple of episodes, that'll be nice.
And I do feel like if they ultimately get to a situation where Loki is running the TVA, I think that's a pretty cool plot development, frankly. But we'll just see how that plays out.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I guess the way I can see it, that if they decided they wanted to have a third season, which apparently Marvel Television is deciding that they can, this is the show that got a second season, unlike any of the others.
Right,
and and so they could decide, they'll pay Tom Hiddleston to do a third season.
I mean, they've got the right cast. If you can keep that cast together, I'd be in favor of a season 3 of this show. Thank you as always, Paul. Appreciate it.
Oh, sure, no problem.
And we'll talk to everybody next time.
Bye.